I've been in the classroom for the better part of 2 decades as a public school teacher. I've taught many subjects. Recently, I was hired as an English teacher for a middle school in California, and I'm not going to mention the school, nor am I going to mention names, because that's not my intent, is to call people out. I just want to convey the dynamics. And I'm a Christian. Now, I don't wear that on my sleeve, but through the course of time, through the course of teaching, especially if you're teaching history, you're teaching worldviews. And eventually it becomes known that I'm a Christian. I don't proselytize my students. I don't try to convince them to be Christians, right? I'm not making sacrifices of chickens in the classroom, okay? I'm not out there trying to force people to believe what I believe. However, I find it's interesting when people find out I'm a Christian, they always want to ask me about it. And I always say, okay, look, if you want to ask me about it, come after class during lunch sometime when we're not in class, and I'll be free to answer any questions you have. And sure enough, the crowds, they come. And some are curious, some are obstinate, some are angry, some are happy, some feel relieved because they're not alone. But recently, especially after COVID, and we had the hard left turn in public education, especially with the state-mandated adherence to protocols, the state-mandated adherence to speech codes, the state-mandated adherence to groupthink that is proliferated ubiquitously in our public educational system, at least in California. I can't speak for the other states. But since that time, especially with the LGBT movement, I will not use preferred pronouns. I refuse to relinquish the category of pronouns and possessive adjectives, by the way, because it's not just pronouns. There are 2 categories that are appropriated under the LGBT flag. Okay? I refuse to relinquish those to a particular view, a particular group of people. To me, they belong to the English language. They don't belong to anybody. Now, if your name is Laura and you want to be called Steve, or if your name is Fred and you want to be called Sarah, I have no problem with that. That is your name. That is your name. I'll call you that name. But pronouns, forget it. I'm not going to do it. And it's against my religion. So as a public school teacher, this is not a popular position. This is not something that people are okay with. But in any event, inevitably I'm pink-slipped. I'm pink-slipped because, I'm unprofessional, I'm not a group thinker, I'm not a group player, blah, blah, blah. There's a bunch of taglines that all administrators use to get rid of people that they don't agree with. And if you want to be a good teacher in public education, you have to obey. And that's not really my style. I'm a critical thinker. I'm the old school type of person who doesn't just take at face value what I'm told, especially by higher ups. And I'm not afraid to express what I believe. Obviously, I wouldn't put these videos out if I were afraid. Okay? So in any event, let me digress. So I got employed at a middle school in a very contentious inner city school that is filled with drug use and fighting and everything else, because it's a leftist school and you're always going to have this kind of thing in a nihilist school that continues to teach lies. Anyway, there were a couple gender dysphoric people in my classroom, and one girl in particularly wanted to be called whatever, and I called her by the name that she preferred, but I wouldn't use the pronouns. And this became obvious because eventually, in the course of conversation, you slip up because you're just not, to have the high acuity that you need to constantly use the right word in every particular politically correct conversation is maddening. So I just speak normally, and sometimes people I call her instead of what she wants to be called, and all of her friends start to go, they correct me, and this went on for like 5 months. And they knew that I was a Christian, and they mocked me because of it. Of course, they put TikTok videos of me in animated puppetry things, and I had a crown of thorns, and mocking me with saying I was a Christian and everything else, which is okay. I didn't really care. But one day, it became particularly caustic, particularly heavy, and I was trying to teach the class, and they just kept going on. Why don't you use the pronouns? And I finally said, look, I'm a Christian. I'm not going to use the pronouns. A man does not become a woman does not become a man. A man has a Y chromosome, a woman has an X chromosome. I could have gone on forever about it, and then I stopped. And this gender dysphoric person got up, left the classroom. All of her friends looked at me and cussed at me and said I was a hater and this and that, and then they went with her. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, my administrator comes in and knocks on my door. I'm like, okay. I knew what was going to happen. It's happened at pretty much every school I've been to where this happens, because if you're a Christian, you're not accepted. They're not inclusive of Christianity. They're inclusive of every satanic thought in the world, even Satan clubs after school. But Christianity, forget it. Anyway, so I go in, and I'm sitting in my principal's office, and she's a female. And we're sitting there alone, and she had, got another teacher to watch my class, whatever. And I'm sitting there, and I'm going, yes. And she goes, well, I'm concerned when students come from your classroom complaining that you said something offensive to them, and they're crying. And I looked at her, and I said, well, should I not tell the truth because it offends? Should I not tell the truth because their feelings may be hurt? What is more loving, to lie or to tell the truth? And she looked at me. And I happen to know that my principal also comes from a Christian background. And I looked at her and I said, you've made a Faustian deal. And she didn't like that. I said, you've made a Faustian deal because you're lying to the kids when you tell them a girl becomes a man and a man becomes a girl, and you are setting them up for inevitable depression, suicidality, and all sorts of mental illness later. I went all the way into John Money and the history of transgenderism, including his experiments on kids and their subsequent suicides, okay? And if you don't know the history of John Money, look him up. Okay, he was a pederast. He created gender theory because he wanted to normalize sex with children. Yeah, I said that. You think that's offensive? You think I'm lying? Go do your own research. In any event, I'm sitting there. I go on for some time, and she finally lets me go. And so it created a caustic atmosphere. In fact, the transgender girl who had left my classroom didn't come to class for, I'd say, a week. And her friends too. They would show up on campus, and I would see them out, I could look out my classroom window and see them out on the softball field or whatever. And the administration wouldn't do anything about it. I'm like, okay. Obviously I didn't make a friend. But I felt morally, I felt like I had spoken truth to power, and despite the fact that there was tension, I felt like I was justified in saying what I said. And so I just let it go, and I kept teaching. And sure enough, fast forward 3 or 4 months, and it took time. These girls, about 5 of them, after calling me, a hater and a transphobe and all this for months, they started hanging out in my classroom. And all the criticisms gradually decreased. And you know what happened? The girl who had the issue with me, who was like the leader of the group, she started coming to me for advice. She started asking me about situations going on with her friends. And I spoke to her, if it were something that, if it were too personal, I would, of course, refer them to the counselor, etc. But, I was flattered to have our conversation with her. And I told her what I felt, and my point of this is that, despite the fact that there may be initial conflict when you speak truth to power, in the end, truth will resound. It will settle. It will shake the earth. It will change the environment. And here's the metaphor that I'd like to use, okay? I love recording. I do my own music, etc. A falsehood or a lie is like a high-pitched frequency that reverberates and bounces off a number of different surfaces and echoes, and it's very hard to distinguish all the different directions it's coming from. And it's overwhelming, and it's very easy to give into because it just pounds you. But the truth is like a very low frequency, almost as if, when the tectonic plates hit each other, it just moves slowly, and it takes time before the ramifications, before the results of the truth settle. But when it does, it shakes the earth. It shakes the foundations, okay? And so if you are a public school teacher, or you are someone who is in a position where you are having a hard time speaking truth, and I'm not talking about subjective truth, I'm not talking about your truth, my truth, because that's postmodernism, that's relativism. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the truth, objective truth. True, what is true today, true tomorrow, has been true since the beginning of time for every person in every circumstance. God's truth. When you speak God's truth, there's going to be an initial pushback because the world is not of truth, right? The world is not speaking truth, especially in our day. Even the very concept of objective truth is anathema, is verboten from public education. But when you speak it clearly. Be prepared. There's going to be a backlash. Stand in it and wait, and you'll see the hand of God.